we take leather, fabric, specifically silk damask, buckle, and rosettes, and we make a belt to make Margaret of York jealous. But this is not a mere project journal, oh no. It is also in part a travel vlog, for like many fashionistas, I have decided that I need a new belt in time for an upcoming event, which happens to fall in the middle of a 28-day European cruise aboard Queen Victoria, and the deadline is 3 weeks hence. Last minute projecting for the win. Okay, well, time to actually cut out the fabric, the covering fabric for this belt. But here's the thing, this is actually an inaugural moment. I bought this amazing reproduction silk damask 12 years ago, and I have not yet cut into it even the littlest bit because I keep saying, well, I want to get the pattern down for the gowns that I'm going to craft out of this fabric. And of course, I never think that the pattern is quite right enough because I paid $35 a meter for this, which back then was crazy expensive. And now it's like, oh, only $35 a meter? Anyway, we're now going to cut into this fabric. Let's do this. Okay, I can do this, I can cut. I'm just gonna cut a little bit. I don't need a lot. I'm just going to Florence. So I'm just going to kind of follow straight through the pattern. And done. Well, that wasn't as traumatic as I thought it would be. Right, okay, onward with the process. Hello everyone, and welcome on board Queen Victoria, an elegant vessel currently moored in Rotterdam. We are on a 4-day party cruise that goes to Bruges tomorrow. And of course, I decided I want to have my new beautiful Burgundian belt all ready so I can go full Madame la Contessa to Bruges tomorrow. So we're actually making the belt tonight, apparently. We're going to try this. And I have outsourced my belt making to my condottiero because I have to work on the hood for my Henin separate project journal to come. So this is really going to be about turbo crafting on the cruise, crafting while cruising with the Contessa. Let's see if we can get this thing accomplished by tomorrow morning. Oh, and should I mention, there's also a big band dance tonight in the ballroom. So we'll be taking a 3-hour break to sweat our arses off and then hopefully finding time somewhere in there to eat and finish this project. Yeah, I know, it's totally unrealistic. I love it. Okay, so now we're going to do this very scientifically. We're going to measure the length we want for the belt by wrapping it around my waist in a very professional fashion and lining it up with where we would like the buckle to actually meet, and then adding about 5 or 6 inches beyond that because we want there to be a bit of a hanging strap in, but not too much, because as you can see from this picture of Mary of Burgundy, her belt did not actually go very much past her waist at all. And we're short on time, so the less we have to sew, the better. We mark the spot with a very professional pencil and go on to the cutting phase. We then use our travel ruler to rule a hopefully more or less straight line. We don't have a T-square, so oh well. And these are scissors we had to buy in Portugal, in Madeira, because our actual beautiful tailor shears, $40 gingers, were confiscated at the port in Southampton as being dangerous because apparently they were concerned I was going to try to hijack the boat, this ship, this massive ship with thousands of people on it with my scissors.
Half of the scissors?
Yeah, with half of them after taking them apart. So yay for security theater because, you know, I can't go to the kitchen and get a chef's knife apparently. And done. Right, so here laid out on our bed cum workbench, we have this gorgeous reproduction 100% silk damask that I haphazardly cut out in preparation for this trip. And we have no straight edge, we have no T-square, none of that. But our goal is to get basically the center, the pomegranates here, to be the center of the belt. And thankfully, we can basically, by placing the belt on it, by making sure that it hits the pattern in the same spot on all 3 of these pomegranates, we should hypothetically be able to keep it straight and even along the pattern. So that's the theory. We're going to see if that works out. Yeah, this is what we call improvising for the win. So we're actually trying to think this through logically, and we want to have one of these pomegranates basically in the center of the front, because ideally the buckle itself will go in the center of my back, so the pomegranate should more or less be in the center of the front. So we've now marked the spot on the belt where that will hypothetically be, which is right here. So we're going to place the belt and cut the fabric out in such a way that that pomegranate pattern there ends up front and center. Theoretically, we'll see how this goes. And here's the nerve-wracking part. We're about to make the first incision into the very expensive silk damask that, unlike skin, will not repair itself if we make a mistake. Right, so we have no T-square in this completely improvised workshop on a cruise ship, but I noticed in the pattern that there's this horizontal checky pattern, and that it lines up exactly across each of these medallions. So I've decided that the position in which I would like the pomegranates to fall is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows up. And so all we have to do to make sure that we get it exactly straight across the pattern is line it up with the top of the 5th row on each medallion. So that is my tip for you. If you don't have a T-square or any other way to improvise one, as in our case, then see if the pattern of your fabric can become your compass, as it were. Okay, so we are now pinning the fabric onto the leather core, but we're not going to sew it this way. We're just using this to make sure that it actually has a good tight fit when we pin it, and then we're going to pull the belt or the leather out from inside, sew it with a nice tight running stitch, and then we're going to turn it right side out and ideally slip that leather right back in. We'll see how that works. We're making this shit up as we go, kids. Okay, well, it's now pinned on. As you can see, it's inverted obviously, but this is what the pattern will look like. So we've got that pretty nicely centered. That is splendid. Okay, on to the sewing. And my condottiero is now sewing the tube with a long running stitch, but a long tight running, a running back stitch, as this is called. So you can see tiny little stitches, but unlike a proper back stitch, they don't abut each other exactly. But this still creates a pretty strong seam, and a strong enough seam for what will be happening to this, I hope. To add strength to the seam and prevent the seam edges from wearing away against the leather, we decide to flat fill the seam by trimming one side of the seam down and folding the other seam over top, then using a blind stitch to secure it flatly. Well, we are at the stuffing the belt cover section of the project. We have specifically and considerately chosen to fold the leather with the grain side in and the smooth side out so that we can make it slip more easily through the sleeve. And also this way, when we turn it right side out, we can specifically turn it with the smooth side of the leather towards the outside, which is basically determined by the part that doesn't have a seam in it. And then we adjust to make sure that that center seam ends up closer to the top, because that will center our pomegranates in the position where we would like them to be. See? Look at that. That's beautiful. We're now going to just go ahead and give it a little test before we proceed onward to see how it will work and or look. And I think that looks pretty damned good. Look how nice and taut the fabric is over the belt, over the leather filling, and it sits pretty much center with the pomegranate design, which was the goal. We're now at the finishing the ends phase, so we have to decide how to do that. And there's a couple of methods we could take, and we're going to try each of them, well, not each of them, but several of them, 2 of them maybe, to make sure that it will actually fit in the belt end and in the buckle. So the buckle is actually bigger, has more room. The chubby finish seam that we created is a little bit too fat, but I think maybe if we iron it, we can probably make it fit. So here we're trying the mitering method, basically, where the way like if you were wrapping a Christmas present in paper, right, and then we would whip stitch that end closed. So now we're going to see if that fits. Will probably fit better if it's actually whip stitched closed.
Yeah. difficulties. I mean, it fits in at the corner, which means it'll fit in all the way down. I just have to get it in.
Yeah, it fits in at the corner, so probably it will fit.
The again, it's the tubby bit.
And then the other approach is just tucking it in like a tube, basically, and then folding that tube over, and I can guarantee you that's way too bulky.
Yeah, it's way too bulky. And
yeah, so definitely the mitering option is the way we're going to go. Another reason to do the Christmas package style mitering is that all of the fabric ends up on the back side, and that leaves the front side to be perfectly smooth. See, all nice and smooth, and the back can be, you know, what it is. Unfortunately, of course, this is the tail, so it's going to show anyway, but it will show less, maybe. Another thing is important to consider is which end will be the strap end and which will be the buckle, and that matters because of the placement. And so I would ideally like this to be the center of the belt. And so that means that this is going to be the buckle and the strap end will go here, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So that's something to take into consideration when you are making a covered belt that is covered in a pattern like this. So we have settled on a whip stitch for the closure of the end. As you can see, it creates a nice, neat little envelope ending that will slip perfectly, ideally, hopefully, into the strap end and the belt buckle. While we sew, let us delve into the history behind this style of belt. As the 15th century wore on, belts in France, Burgundy, and England grew wider and wider until achieving a truly waist-cinching width. Sadly, no extant examples of this width have survived, nor have any buckles of this width, no doubt because they were melted down into other pieces once this style of belt fell out of fashion at the end of the 15th century. Although, that being said, we do have several examples of ladies' belts fashioned of rich brocade, purpose-woven bands from the mid-15th century, which are corroborated in the visual record. These are, however, much narrower than the item we are making, and therefore do not require the sort of reinforcement that such a wide belt will require to prevent it from collapsing on itself while being worn. Well, at least while being worn by me. I mean, we all know that I'm, what shall you say, hard on my clothes? Aside from visual evidence, which can always be deceiving, this style of girdle made of damask is also explicitly mentioned in wills and inventories. For instance, the 1487 will of Elizabeth Pawnings, a member of the up-and-coming Paston family, features a plethora of such belts in a variety of colors, including specifically several of damask. The will even mentions bars of gilt silver on one of them, which would help reinforce such a very wide belt in addition to, you know, blinging it up, as the kids are saying these days. As a side note, I feel that, as Madame la Contessa, I should have at least as many girdles as the middling sort upstart Elizabeth. Well, armed with that information, we proceed onward. So, the moment of truth, ladies and gentlemen. Will it fit with all that fabric on there? And look at that perfect fit. This is a moment of triumph. Isn't that stunning? And also, I can weaponize that belt end if I need to. So muggers of the world, beware. Remember to always iron your sewing project. Well, if you have an iron on hand, that is, which I somehow don't always. On our next exciting episode, we will figure out how to attach the various hardware, referred to sometimes as harness in the 15th century, and finish this baby up. Have you made a similarly wide belt? What materials did you choose? Do you have any questions on this accessory or the process? Let me know in the comments below here on YouTube. Otherwise, until the next time, stay creative and stay tuned for your moment of kitty zen.